to get scanned up. So that's 90,000. They've gotten through, obviously, over 90% of their ballots that came in. So we anticipate seeing both them and DeKalb getting those uploaded hopefully before 9 o'clock. So that'll give us a better indication of where we are, because those are the largest counties.
And any indication of between 600 to 1.1, do you think it's closer to the 600 side or the 1.1 side?
I'll be lying if I said I had an idea. We don't have an idea right now. I mean, the one thing that's interesting, when you have 159 counties, you know, you can nickel and dime yourself up to those numbers pretty quickly. So even on a mid-level turnout that was steady all day, you can still see some pretty big numbers. Because in the primary, we saw 880,000 overall, and it felt like the world was on fire. And we had 900 and some odd, close to 1 million on Election Day in November, and it didn't feel like that at all. So we are all still learning the system. We're all learning to kind of understand and engage where we are in these things. So we could still see 1 million. I have no idea, and I have no gut feeling from it because it's all anecdotal, and you can't go by Twitter and Facebook. Yes.
So going off
One
that,
second.
you can't gauge overall in-person turnout today versus November.
Not until we're done getting those results in. No, ma'am. John.
So 229,000 or so outstanding, and you'll know more after 7 o'clock, obviously, how many of those were returned. But
we'll really know tomorrow by 1 o'clock. We've asked, because we can't direct the counties, to have all of their stuff, at least so we get the outward bound of what they have received by 1 p.m. tomorrow, for the stuff they got today and for the drop boxes today.
And the early scanning and the scanning of these still outstanding ballots, mail-in ballots, could be complete by when?
They could, depends on the county. The majority of the counties ought to be done by really tomorrow for certain. A lot of them will be done tonight because they're smaller counties. They can probably process some of these, but they are also dog tired. I mean, most of these counties met since 4 in the morning, so directing them to stay, do their signature match, and scan those last ones in after they've had a full day today, it will, I think, in a real life world, they're going to come in tomorrow morning fresh and try to finish that up.
And just my one follow-up is, therefore, how quickly can they then count the votes compared with how long it took them after the November 3rd election?
Well, let's realize something. It didn't take that long after the November 3rd election. The problem was that there was nickels and dimes out there. The final thing, it went from the president was up, I think, Thursday by about 15,000 votes, and then by the following Monday, he was down by about 11,000 votes. So if you take all 5 million votes, we had 99 point something of the votes in. So this depends on the margin and the number of ballots that are out there. We won't know that. We don't have a better handle on that until after 1 o'clock tomorrow, probably.
Have you had any incidents to report, any disruptions, any voters who said something that they shouldn't have said, or has everything gone smoothly for the most part today?
Everything's gone smoothly for the most part. We had a couple of monitors that, felt like they should have had more access than they probably should have been allowed under the law. We also had counties that didn't allow as much access as they could. The Republicans took Fulton County to court today and got a consent order to basically allow them to have more access than they did. Fulton County had opaque barriers up between the work that they were doing and the monitors. Judge Barwick did a ruling today from a 3:30 hearing. I don't know exactly when it came down. Or it was a consent decree that both sides agreed. They put tape on the ground for 10 feet out. They took down the opaque barriers, or they're supposed to have. I haven't gotten an update as to whether it all has occurred yet, for both signature verification and absentee ballot processing. So there's always going to be some of that, especially in a really intense election like this, but we haven't seen any widespread, people yelling at each other, people being removed from polling locations, no real disruptions during election day processing.
Again, what's the biggest problem you have about today?
Boredom? I mean, which is a good problem to have, I suppose. We haven't had a lot of issues around this. We did have some stuff this morning where there was a slowdown in our ENET system, and I believe there's been some reporting done on that there was it put a single IP address that was sending a lot of traffic to us that we blacklisted and then informed the Cyber Infrastructure and Security Agency about that. So and the FBI, we saw some of that, and we're keeping an eye on it. We haven't seen anything since then. We don't anticipate any other issues tonight, but again, the main things you see is it's kind of like a plane. Your biggest issue is when you take off and when you land. So we took off this morning pretty well. We had a little bit of those problems in Columbia County, which we've gone over. But now we've got to come in for the landing, which is closing the polling locations properly, making sure they get the memory cards out, and invariably Fulton and DeKalb has like 1 or 2 memory cards get left behind a polling location. But for the most part, we've seen a pretty smooth election, and I think that's a testament to these thousands of very hardworking elections officials and poll workers that have done yeoman's work under high intensity. And we told them in January, this is before COVID even, we brought in outside consultants to tell them, you're going to be under a microscope. You're going to be under pressure. And little did they know when we were warning them about this in January of 2020 that this was going to be culminating in literally the eyes of the world on us, because there's no other thing happening in politics except here and then in Washington, D.C. tomorrow.
Are you able to monitor more or less in real? Are you able to monitor more or less in real time how heavy turnout it is in different parts of the state?
Not as much as we did during the general election, because during the general election we had Dominion techs that were kind of state subcontractors. We have them with the app, so we had a lot more real-time data. This time we had fewer of them, mainly because we didn't need them, because people now understand the equipment. So we had about 400 and something out there. Then we supplemented that with Fulton. Fulton had their own people out there, so we had 800 out of the 2,600 had somebody there monitoring, saying the wait times. So we didn't have as good and broad of a thing as we did in the general election. But in general, we have that data plus the anecdotal data. So we've seen basically in north and northwest Georgia some lines, in middle of Georgia some lines, but in general, average wait times 1 minute to 5 minutes statewide today is what we've seen.
The
Dale.
IP address you mentioned,
Mhm.
ping.net, is this, it sounds like a hacking attempt.
Well, what happened was it was slower than a normal dial of service, so it didn't set off the normal alarms. So we did see a slowdown, so our infrastructure security team went to track it down and say, why is there heavy? You normally see some slowdown because on election day people are using my voter page. And they went and found a single IP address doing a request 10 requests about every second, which is a little faster than normal, but it wasn't fast enough to trigger the signals that it might be a denial of service attack. So it could have been a probe, it could have been a kid, it could have been any number of things, but we went ahead and blacklisted it to head it off and then keep an eye out for anything else that might be happening on it. It was a domestic IP address, but we don't know, it could have been masked from another area. We just don't have enough information yet, but we took action as soon as we were aware of it.
And that was to your main site?
That was to the My Voter page,
The My Voter.
which is just a way to access information for individual voters to find their polling location and find the status of their absentee ballot.
As the evening goes on, what other kinds of updates will you be able to give us as the information starts coming in? What types of information you'll be gathering as the polls close and you'll be watching the counts begin?
Well, you'll be seeing live on our election night reporting page on the sos.ge.gov page. As we get information, it'll be uploaded as quickly as we can. The way the system works is the counties will take their memory cards either from the advanced in-person voting machines, which are the ICP scanners that are used for the early voting, and from the ICCs, the high-speed scanners used for the absentee voting, and start loading those into the election management system. They will take that data, because it's air-gapped, it can't go straight from that system. They'll take a thumb drive and then take it to another computer to upload it into the CITL, which is our election night reporting system. From there, we will start getting an idea of the style of votes that are coming in and how many there are. So we can start getting an idea, because we know the outward bound of absentee ballots right now. So we'll be able to see this is what's kind of still out there. And we will, as best we can, as we get information that we can sort of delineate down to y'all to give a better scope for people out there to understand what they're looking at as it comes in. We're hoping we won't see the sort of wild swings we saw in terms of dumping a bunch of one type of vote and a bunch of another type of vote, because what happened was, because of the bifurcation of how different people of political persuasions are voting, you saw a wild dichotomy between ballot types that historically hasn't existed. And a lot of that existed because the President of the United States told people don't use mail voting, which was historically a Republican tool, but over the last couple of cycles been viewed as more of a Democrat tool. And in an attempt to try to get people to vote in person on Election Day, he undermined the faith in that process, which then caused a lot more Democrats who were already a little more COVID cautious than Republicans in general, who were going to do that. It really started to spread that out. You saw 2-to-1 Election Day. I think it was 60% to 38% Republican on Election Day, and something like 66% to 34% on the absentee ballot the other way, basically. So, and then the absentee in person was sort of a split depending on where you were. All right. Thank you all very much, and I hope that we'll have some good answers and quick answers for everybody as we go through the evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure if these cameras are able to send video shots or everything else on the side. It just video. Okay.
Oh, we'll have to do a heads up. Maybe
Sure, yeah.
Yes, I can get one. Maybe I need to feed that back.